I will let Belinda Tanoto welcome you all to the breakfast first. Yes, Belinda, please.
Good morning and welcome to Tanoto Art Foundation's conversation series. I'm so happy here to be surrounded by so many old friends and new friends of the foundation. We formally launched the foundation earlier this year in January in Singapore. A quick introduction for the new friends. We are a privately funded, not-for-profit foundation headquartered in Singapore, focused on connecting and engaging people to the art of our time. The foundation is really the brainchild of my mother's, who unfortunately cannot be here today, but she grew up in a very small rural town in Indonesia. She loved the arts, but didn't have access to museums. Fast forward to today, we saw that we also could contribute to the growing art ecosystem in Southeast Asia by creating a new institution that is nimble, that is agile, that works thematically and across borders. So think permeability, think exchange, think multiplicity, not separation and purity of identity. Recognizing that an art institution is more than a physical space, but about building a community, we're so happy to have all of you here today and to launch the foundation with a symposium in January, which I see a lot of you attended, as well as a series of conversations, both in our home base in Singapore, as well as today here in Hong Kong and later in the year in Sao Paulo. Some of you may ask, why Singapore, why Hong Kong, why Sao Paulo? At TAF, we believe in the multiplicity of things. We believe in the histories. We are interested in the histories with the ESs, not history. So we believe that Singapore, Hong Kong, Sao Paulo really embody that spirit of diversity, that spirit of exchange, that spirit of openness. In addition to the conversation series, we'll also be doing a series of artist projects supporting commissions and supporting Asian artists going global, as well as bringing global artists into Singapore. I'm so happy to see Kim, who's curating the Singapore Biennale and will be supporting a lot of the artists, some of the artists in the Singapore Biennale. Finally, oh yes, and I want to share also, one of my favorite artists, Rickert, was saying, you need to bring them in to bring them out. So we're really interested in catalyzing those unexplored connections, fostering new friendships, and bringing the community together. Last but not least, with everything that's happening in the world today, I just want to thank you for taking the time to come together. At the foundation, we're really interested in creating a community of learning, community for reflection, as well as community to celebrate both our similarities, but also our differences. With that, I'll hand over to Xiaoyu, who will introduce a little bit more about the foundation programming, what we're doing this year, as well as the two wonderful speakers that we're so fortunate to have today, Heidi and Lotus. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. Okay, I will invite Heidi on the stage, please. Oh, you need to have a microphone. Here you go. Thank you everyone for coming for the breakfast. I know it's a really busy week, and it's so great to be back in Hong Kong during the fair, to be surrounded by such wonderful energy. I really believe the physical connection is important. I will say that we're all made up from this little atoms that actually vibrating in space. So I think the physicality is very important. With that said, actually we're very sad today that we won't have Lotus Kang join us. How should I put it? We're living in a very strange and surreal time. Since Trump has inaugurated, there are a lot of travel scares in the United States. And Lotus is having a Canadian passport and an artist visa, like many of the artists working diasporically, living in New York. We are now running a risk of the artists being denied at the border, and actually already happened to some of our friends. After speaking to a few attorneys that Lotus and I and the team made a very painful decision that she will join us today via Zoom and virtually. It's going against what I said earlier about this physical connection, but I'm sure we're gonna have a wonderful conversation, and very happy Heidi is here with us. Just a little bit also about this idea that we spoke around, physicality, digitalization, material and immaterial. I think the world is really unstoppably pivoting towards digital. And that's also why we are very interested in explore the idea of materiality. And for TAF, the programming is really research-driven and process-focused. Meaning that we will explore these themes together with artists that we would engage for conversations and discursive events as such, but also exhibitions in the near future. And the TAF conversation series, as we call it, very straightforward, is inaugurated today by artist Heidi Lau and Lotus L. We really love to hear from them talking about their work because both of them have a very process-driven and conceptually complex practice. They share a certain sensibility that will bring in a very unique perspective on what we understand material today. And also, we don't really want to put material and immaterial in a binary opposition because there are a lot of things that just happen in very interesting, sort of mutual informative ways. With that said, I'm gonna actually turn on the camera for Lotus. She's been waiting for us on the other side. Lotus? Yes, we can hear you.
Great. How's the sound quality?
It's pretty good. Yeah. Okay, so I will also explain a little bit about, today our sort of process of the conversation. Lotus and Heidi would each have about 10 minutes or so to give you an overview of their recent practice, which you will see here in the slideshow. The images is just gonna rotate as the artists talk through them. And then we will have a conversation. I have prepared quite a few questions for you guys. And in the end, we're happy to take a Q&A if you have any, urgent questions you want to ask to the artist. Also, maybe I should formally introduce the two artists a little bit. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with their practice already, but I would just love to read their very impressive bio. So Lotus Kang, born in 1985 in Toronto, works with sculpture, photography, and site-responsive installation. Known for her sprawling installations and distinctive material repertoire, Kang's practice is a dialogue with the impermanence and the in-between. She's having a very important solo exhibitions coming up, opening on April 10th at 52 Walker in New York. She also has had solo exhibitions at the Chisenhall Gallery in London, Contemporary Art Gallery in Vancouver, also Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago. In 2025, I already mentioned, that's the show coming up at 52 Walker. But Lotus's work was also part of the 2024 Whitney Biennial, and it was singled out by New York Times as one of the best work in the show. Very beautiful work. She was also in the 2021 New Museum Triennial. Then we have Heidi Lau, born in 1987 in Macau, grew up in Macau and lives and works in New York. Lau's sculpture practice views clay as the ideal conduit to explore the malleability and materiality of time. Her hand-built formations of clay melt a zoomorphic sensibility with the totemic presence of ritual items and primordial moments. Drawing upon mythological, historical, and environmental source narratives, Lau's work suggests anti-categorical, pluralistic imaginings of material and space, channeled through personal memory. She has had solo and two-person shows also in various galleries, and also the Browns Museum of the Arts in New York, Macau Art Museum, among many others. Actually, Heidi just attended a wonderful group exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum yesterday, and her work was part of the show. Heidi is also one of the finalists for the SIG Awards at M+, and she will be in the group exhibition later this year. We're so looking forward to see the work. Okay, so with that said, I will hand it to Lotus, that you could start by talking a little bit about your work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hi, Heidi, nice to see you there. Firstly, it's a total bummer that I can't be there in person. Thank you everyone who I can't see currently, but thank you everyone for making the talk this morning, my evening here in Brooklyn. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Tanoto Foundation and everyone there, Belinda, Xiaoyu Weng, Naomi, and Penny. You all have been incredible and so supportive, and thank you for figuring a way out with this sudden situation we found ourselves in. So I'm going to briefly speak about two bodies of work. I will start with In Cascades, which was most recently on view at the Whitney Museum in the Biennial. Originally, this body of work, In Cascades, was co-commissioned by two institutions, Chisholm Gallery in London, as well as Contemporary Art Gallery in Vancouver. So this was a almost 2-year-long project in the making and experimenting and in the process. And each time that it was shown, it kind of reiterated itself in a different formation, whether that meant a kind of different architectural suggestion that the films created in space and or different sculptures that were introduced. Prior to making this work, I still maintained and still currently maintain an interest in industrial off-the-shelf materials, meaning not necessarily designed by myself and fabricated by myself, but working with materials that exist in the world and are very much so of the world and speak to social structures that exist, architectures most often. And I was working with industrial materials to build these kind of sculpture installations that felt very in process and unfinished and raw and uncovered, essentially. That also formally played with distinctions of like soft and hard, horizontal, vertical, etc. And with this exhibition, I became interested in, so previously those took the form of walls. I made this kind of wall for the New Museum Triennial that kind of cut the space vertically as this kind of vertical structure. And in Cascades, I became very interested in kind of dispersing that structure in space and creating a much more spatial environment that one could immerse into, be inside of, as well as outside of. And so the idea of horizontality as well as verticality became very important, as well as this idea of getting a viewer to look up and be very aware of their body in that sense. So there was this scaffold that existed above the viewer's head that was made of an industrial material called super joist. And I was drawn to this material because it is full of holes. And I'm interested in this fact that, you know, on an infrastructural level, the fact that it's comprised more of lack than it is form. And this negative space is what gives it its infrastructural integrity and strength. So actually, the less volume it takes up, the stronger it is on an infrastructural level. And you know, I'm interested in this kind of inversion of what we think of emptiness as a fullness or a lack, or a void as a form or a fullness in and of itself. And from that ceiling structure made of super joists hung these lengths of unfixed films, which I call skins. I also call them molt. I call the process tanning. It's essentially a process of exposing, but I call it tanning to bring attention to the body, to skin, to notions of growth, change, death, and also rebirth. And they remain in an unfixed state, so they are continually sensitive to light. Their sensitivity is, exaggerated in situations where there is natural light, and much slower and less visible in situations where there is not UV light present. So they have this kind of ability to fluctuate between a kind of visible or witnessable transformation or change versus this more like illegible transformation, which I'm interested in that tension as well. So we're seeing images of the exhibition across the 3 venues, which all of them had very different lighting conditions, which led to the film appearing differently. And the films themselves kind of presented what I was thinking of as a kind of ghostly architecture, where the film was neither just a wall or, a scroll, but it also became a framing device. It also became the main character. It kind of moved hybridically between form and structure, or architecture and the thing contained within an architecture itself. And then on the floor were a series of floor-based sculptures comprised of tatami mats. I was interested in that form as this kind of stratified object, or it suggested a kind of strata or a layering. And it kind of became a stand-in for the body, and in its kind of layered quality, suggested this kind of way in which a body holds histories, time, memory, inheritances, etc. And there were various objects placed in and around those tatamis, as well as photographs that documented a ritual performance that I enacted that were part of the materials list but remain unseen. So it was really thinking about what's held in a body over time. I'll keep that one brief because I'm seeing that it's time to move on to the second project. The second project is a more recent one that I did in the fall of 2024. It was at Commonwealth and Council Gallery in Los Angeles. And it's a show called, it was a show called Azaleas, and the piece itself was also called Azaleas. The work both began with,
Recording in progress.
Sorry.
Oh, I see. I was hoping your face that you could still hear me. So Azaleas was a new exploration that very much so, I think at least, continued my way of thinking about materials, form, conceptual underpinnings without, being overly explicit or explanatory. I think about this thing of showing rather than doing a lot of my work. So I hope that my work embodies the ideas rather than illustrates the ideas. So similarly with Azaleas, I was beginning with a poem called Azaleas, and then very much so departing from it or betraying it. And I really think about betrayal as a form of honoring, in that in order to kind of understand something, we are marked by it, but we also mark it. So this poem is a historic Korean poem that, from my understanding, most every Korean knows in Korea. They grew up learning this poem by heart. I did not, because I was not born in Korea, and of course I was only engaging with an English translation of it. Essentially, it's a poem that describes a lover who is leaving, a woman that her lover is leaving her, and she's kind of gathering azalea flowers and spreading them on her lover's path as they leave her, and kind of resolutely saying she won't shed a tear as the lover leaves her. It's almost saccharine, to be honest, this poem. It's full of this kind of bittersweet love, sorrow, loss, and it was very rhythmically written in Korean, which is part of why it became this kind of national treasure. But it was also written during the time of Japanese rule in Korea, and so it's been interpreted over time in a myriad of ways, including as this kind of possibly coded metaphor for this loss of a nation. I became fascinated by this poem that exists in a multitude of bodies in an entire nation, and the fact that poetry has no single meaning. It's inherently multiplicitous and malleable, and in some ways a much more true historical document via its malleability and its kind of condition on the subject encountering it. So the work itself was an interpretation or a translation of that poem, if I can stretch it that far. And it consisted of, I filmed roses instead of azaleas, so I was kind of interested in this double lack of like not filming the thing that's being talked about, but another thing. And I filmed these roses and wrapped it around this structure, which is in and of itself an enlarged structure based on a rotary film dryer, which is a tool used in filmmaking processes, which is very much so a process-oriented tool. But it was enlarged, and then the film wrapped it. It was hundreds of feet of this film, and I programmed a score for the work, so it's rotating to the syllabic meter of the poem itself in Korean, and the lights kind of illuminated the film at different heights so that the image that you see is this kind of blurred image of the film that architecturally envelops the whole space, and yet it feels very temporal and transitional, and the objects arranged in and around the base that the structure was on also kind of became part of this like shadow play or tableau that was projected on the walls and disappeared. And in a way very much so thinking about this loss that's doubled again, as well as this notion of time, that the film is seen simultaneously. There's no linear time at all. It's either no time or all time or simultaneous time or something like this. So I will stop there, and I'm sure we'll get into it more in our discussion.
This is great, and you're perfectly on time. And I'll pass it to Heidi.
Hi. So I had the first image you just saw was a chainmail, a handmade chainmail funeral garment I made around 8 years ago. Because that year I had lost both my mom and my grandma, and at the time grieving with my hand was the only way I could think of to process what happened. But I also want to include that because I want to introduce this exhibition at Greenwood Cemetery that was in 2021, and that funeral garment really started my interest in funeral objects, afterlife, and also taught me to stop thinking about life and death as like a binary, but as maybe like various degree of like animism. So I was an artist in residence at Greenwood Cemetery for a year and a half, and it was also almost like a 50-acre botanical garden. And as I was wandering, I spent a lot of time exploring the cemetery, kind of wandering both spaces for living and the dead. It reminded me of the experience of growing up in Macau, visiting my grandpa's own balcony garden as well as a garden we frequent. And because of that, I decided to recreate, sorry, we moved on, but some sort of garden inside a catacomb. And in a traditional Chinese garden, all the pathways, ponds, bonsai, you know, like it's meant to be kind of, they're like kind of metaphor for time and space, and also as one experience changes in the garden, it's kind of a way to understand like impermanence and our space in the cosmos. And so all the objects in the catacomb were kind of built with that in mind. There was a lot of like hybrid between grottos and becoming human, kind of, and all the, if the image come back, I'll point out, and all the pieces on the floor kind of were kind of beckoning or reaching out to the skylight in the catacomb, which to me is like a way to ascend to or understand the unknown. And sorry, and another something else I was thinking of was instead of like collaborating with nature, like one would be in the garden, I feel like I was also collaborating with spirits because my work was literally installed in front of catacomb, where in front of a mausoleum where bones have been there and are still there, probably forever, and that was that was my kind of the first project I wanted to. I'll jump ahead because this is where we are. I have included vessels that I have created from 2020 until now. I had started the vessel form actually in my apartment in New York during lockdown, and at the time I had a habit of photographing buildings in Macau whenever I went home to visit, and at the time I just kind of find myself going through this hundreds of archive of really mundane images of buildings and wanting to make them in the style of Mingqi, Minghe, which is like kind of a kind of like Han Dynasty burial objects that were meant to be blueprints for underworld. And so the first two images, 20 images you saw were kind of very like, in some ways, are very like exacting but stylized vessels. In the last like 5 years, they have become much more abstract and kind of reference the body. Like for me, vessels is a perfect like triangulation of like a container for like myth, personal memories, and like architectural remnants, like kind of all in a single form. And the vessels I make now kind of follows this thing I read called like landscape experience in like Chinese landscape painting, where the bottom of the vessel or the bottom of painting reference kind of like phenomenal world. And as you, or as I build the work in a vertical way, I'm also trying to, I don't know, scope or like reach for mythical or the unknown as I go. Okay. Okay. And oh, I guess I can come back. This was the mausoleum I was kind of talking about earlier, where I felt like I was collaborating with bodies that have been there for a long time. And the last exhibition I wanted to quickly talk about was it's called the Cacophony of Rocks. Oh, sorry. This was at Sigma Malloy Jenkins in New York last January, and it's just want to briefly mention. Just it was the first time I had incorporate sound in a lot of the. Okay. I had mentioned the funeral garments from 7 years ago, but last year was the exhumation and burial of my mom's body, and I thought it was the right occasion for me to, I don't know, kind of tackle that experience again. So this whole exhibition was kind of based on, all the sound works were based on my experience being in ER room with her. And the sound consists of machine noises, few recordings from places me and my mom used to be, and this kind of like soundscape that I was hearing as my mom was taking her last breaths, and all this totemic work, they were meant to be kind of like spine on the wall, kind of like supporting the space that I felt like was going to collapse at the time. Sorry, is that really? Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah, sorry.
So much. Oop. Yeah, thank you both for giving us a quick overview of your practice. It's certainly very beautiful and profound. I think we probably already picked up a few threads of why I feel your work are connected in a sense. And so I'm going to open to a conversation between you two. I'm actually curious, both of you had mentioned your experience with your work with time and impermanence. That seems to be something that, you know, is a through line for your practice, and also this idea of changing and refusal to be categorized. And for Lotus, of course, the tanning process of your film, and for Heidi, you were speaking about how, you know, the shifting of your ceramic work. So I want both of you maybe comment a little bit more about how do you connect these concepts with the materials you're choosing to use in your work. Maybe Heidi, you can start first.
I think for me, so the term like vessel, which like literally translate to like hey, it's also the same word in Chinese for a tool to do something, or like an action that's about to be taken. And I think working in clay kind of help me with kind of that cyclical relationship where I feel like sometimes I'm the vessel making the vessel, but sometimes actually like it's the vessel or clay that's kind of also making me at the same time, because it's such a like malleable and like an intimate experience.
Yeah, that's great. How about you, Lotus?
Yeah, for me, it's a big question, but this idea of impermanence, or like the in-between, the way, I guess, you know, I'm not actively seeking impermanent materials, but I think my orientation towards materials is one of like non-domination, for lack of a better term, and is clearly informed from my subjectivity as well as my own interest in and scholarship in, like, you know, queer feminist theory from a post-colonial or decolonial perspective, which very much so sees us as bodies as kind of indistinct in terms of, like, you know, what we think of as the bounds of our bodies are actually very porous with the environment and vice versa. And so I think it just informs my regard for materials, and then these themes of impermanence emerge. That's a very brief way to describe it on like on a kind of more formal level, but of course conceptually it's like I could take up the rest of the time talking about that.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question for you just on that, because for Heidi, the material is very, you know, singular. You work with clay, it's ceramic, there's this very process-driven, it's a firing and all that. But for you, Lotus, besides these film that you accidentally encountered, in the early years of your practice, you also start making, these small sculptures and objects with metal. And also you have, employed found objects like the tatami mat. And I'm just curious, how do you make the connections of all these different materials?
I mean, yeah, I think they speak to time in really different ways, right? There's processes baked into something like a cast object, which, I work with a foundry, and of course there's the process of making a found object, but our regard for these things operate in different time scales, whether we consciously perceive that or not when we encounter these objects and materials in the world. So I think it's definitely a way for me to kind of mash different time scales together. As well as this thing of like, I always call it like this earthly insistence. I'm not trying to leave this planet. As much as some of the installations can have this ethereal feeling, I'm actually very interested in like our earthly existence and working with things of the world and processes of the world of human invention, whether they're toxic or not, to kind of speak to our existence rather than escape it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, this is a nice segue to my next question, because I find both of your work and your process has this very intimate layer, both from a conceptual point of view, a narrative point of view in terms of the storytelling, how it connects to your personal memories and life, but also literally you're physically touching the work as you're shaping it. There's this skin, touch the materials, the tactile processy. So I want to just let you both speak a little bit more about that, how this physicality connects with the emotion and the material and the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this question is probably easier for I feel like, yeah, clay is probably one of the most intimate material one can use. Like it, any imprint you put on the clay, it kind of absorbed and stay there. It's almost kind of like a diary that it like records so many things. But I also think on the conceptual level, like I think about this term like diasporic intimacy that was talked about by Svetlana. Can't pronounce her name properly, but it's a kind of intimacy that that was experienced by immigrants or diasporic person who kind of want to defy this really perfect image of homecoming. It's just as deep of an emotion of longing, but it's also suspicious of this kind of singular return of home. And I think using clay intrinsically help me kind of record multiple realities at any time.
Yeah, that's very beautifully said, the diasporic intimacy. I think it's also a very embodied experience where you share something not through language or not through direct communication, but forms of, emotional communication. And sometimes spending time with art can lead us to that kind of transcendent experience. So I'll pass it to Lotus. Yeah, please also comment on that question.
Yeah, about intimacy. I guess, I think Heidi, more so than me, you see the index of your hand in your work more, like at least on a very literal level, and the way you spoke about clay, and that it has this clear malleability. I guess I think about intimacy in my work, whether you see my, literal hand working with the material or shaping the material or not, through gesture and through arrangement, actually, like through bringing objects into relation. So I think my hand is seen more in like, look at this with this, and then this in between, and this on top. So, and I think that starts to suggest a kind of intimacy, whether or not I made those objects, and oftentimes I do, but they have they can often, on an isolated level, have, a more kind of sterile or in the realm of like the minimalist canon feel to them, and yet when they kind of get sedimented together, the way I kind of arrange things, this other kind of intimacy or affect emerges. That I really like this notion of diasporic intimacy. It's less nameable, I think. It's definitely more felt than known, and I think it also tends to make a lot more sense afterwards, like in after time, rather than in that moment.
Yeah, I think it's also a very interesting concept because being diasporic and being diaspora itself has shifting and changed and evolved over the years. We may even say we are all diasporic in certain ways, alienated by a kind of modern living or a digital living fused by technology. So I think it's really interesting also to expand this idea. And I actually have one last question for both of you. We're very curious, me also personally, about your upcoming project. What can you tell us about, anything you're making or thinking about making? I think, Lotus, your show is pretty much hopefully all set. You're going to enter installation very quickly in the coming days. And for Heidi, I think your show is in September? Yeah. So it would be great if you could give us a sneak preview of what we are anticipating here. Yes.
I guess one thing I ran out of time to talk about on the slideshow. For the last few years, I've been reading and rereading classics of mountains and seas, and kind of reference a lot of the non-hierarchical world building techniques that I find in the book, and started writing my own characters, kind of based on my family members. And so that was kind of be my focus for my upcoming show in September. And I'm also trying to learn and incorporate robotics in some of the ceramic pieces, because that character reference a lot of movement, but most importantly, kind of movement that don't lead to any productive activities.
Interesting. What do you mean by robotics in that sense?
It's going to move according to a family member of mine who is disabled.
Wow, so it will be actually moving, so it's not a static object. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. That's very curious. We can't wait to see it. Yeah. How about you, Lotus?
Yeah, I'm working on my show already at 52 Walker. The title is already, but I am already working on it. And it very much so, the title, it's thinking about time. Via the title, it's thinking about time that precedes a being, but that one knows is kind of connected to. I'm interested in how that word presupposes some kind of awareness of something that came before you, whether it's a body or an event or whatever, and that you are now kind of implicated in. But on a formal level, it's a kind of multifaceted installation that will, for the first time, inhabit not just the main floor of the gallery, but the downstairs galleries. So it's a kind of full architectural inhabitation with several installations, including another iteration of azaleas, the kinetic rotating sculpture I shared, as well as installations staged within and around 2 greenhouses, which are these, in my view, a kind of architecture of becoming, or these containers of time and space. Yeah, if anybody's in New York, April 11th to June 7th, it will be there. I will be there too.
Yeah, so that's when you can go shake Lotus's hand and really touching her physically. Okay, we're gonna wrap our on-stage conversation up, but if any of you have a question for either Heidi or Lotus, please raise your hand now. We can pass you the microphone. But of course, you're welcome to talk more intimately with Heidi since she's here, and we're gonna continue to mingle, and you can grab more food or anything if you like. So I would just offer, anyone has a question? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for supporting us. Please continue to follow our program. As Belinda said, for the TAF conversation series, we have an upcoming one in June back home in Singapore, curated by a wonderful curator, Bin, who's sitting here. And we're also collaborating with Sao Paulo Biennial, supporting artists from Southeast Asia. We will have another conversation series there in September. Then we'll be back in Singapore again in November. So please stay tuned, and thank you again for coming today. Thanks, Lotus. We missed you. Bye.